FA podcast. I am your host, Josh Shepherdson, otherwise known as @BChat50 on Twitter, and I'm here to talk outfield rankings today. The outfield is deep, and I have them ranked 100 deep. Not going to go through every player like we have on the other podcasts, but I am going to address where each player ranks, look at some of the high points for some of these guys, and point out some of my sleepers a little bit deeper in the list. So without further ado, I'm going to jump right into that. The outfielders lead off with, as you'd expect, the consensus #1 pick in fantasy drafts, Mike Trout. Last year, he stole only 16 bases. That's basically the only blemish on his statistical profile from last year. 287 average, and I would expect both the average and the stolen bases to go up. He stole 33 in 2013. I don't think he's going to get back to that level, but I would say over 20 stolen bases is fair if he gets on base a little bit more this year. I think he cuts back on his strikeout rate, which went up a little bit. And you're looking at a true 5-category contributor, and I mean, just a beast. There's really no reason to be contrarian and go any other direction than Mike Trout at pick 1. So we'll move on from him. The guy that I think is most likely to challenge him for that top spot is our second-ranked outfielder. That's Andrew McCutchen of the Pittsburgh Pirates. 25 home runs, 18 stolen bases, and a .314 average last year. Basically, he is Mike Trout light, and not that light. Good season with maybe a favorable home run fly ball rate, a few more stolen bases, and continued high batting averages, and you're talking about Mike Trout basically in the form of Andrew McCutchen. So he's my #2 in the outfield, my #2 pick if I hold it in fantasy drafts, and another guy that's going to fill 5 categories and really start you off the right way in your drafts. Giancarlo Stanton ranks 3rd. The man got paid this offseason, and he got paid for good reason. Big power hitter, hit 37 home runs last year. But that's not all that he is. He's not just a one-dimensional slugger. He cut his strikeout rate down to 26.6%, which isn't great, but it is a step in the right direction. The result, a .288 batting average. And the thing is, I don't think that batting average is going to go down a ton. I do think he probably drops into the low 280s, but continued growth in his strikeout rate would help alleviate any BABIP regression. And the something that's easy to forget with Giancarlo Stanton, when you look at that huge power profile, this guy can run a little bit too. Stole 13 bases last year. Not as much stolen base ceiling as Trout and McCutchen in front of him, but bigger power ceiling, lower average, likely to post a lower average than the other two. But this is your 3rd outfielder and another guy that's a top 5 pick for me. Probably would also be my 3rd pick. So the 3 outfielders go 1, 2, 3 on my draft board, are pretty darn close to it. Stanton maybe not. I'd have to reassess depending on size of the league, and really how I want to build my team, but he's at least in that discussion, and he's a fantastic option. Carlos Gomez makes it 4 guys that should go in the first round of fantasy drafts from the outfield. 22 home runs, 34 stolen bases last year, 24 home runs, 40 stolen bases, and 13, .284 average in back-to-back seasons. The biggest knock on Gomez is that he doesn't produce as gaudy of numbers in the RBI and run categories as the 3 outfielders ranked ahead of him. He's not as disciplined at the plate as those 3 either, so there is some potential for a little bit of a batting average drop, but a big power speed combination guy. And whether he's hitting leadoff or possibly 5th for the Brewers, he should still get hearty run production totals, even if they don't line up necessarily with Trout, McCutchen, and Stanton. So Gomez is another great foundational piece. If you're looking for somebody in the first round and you're, say, at the back half of the first round, Carlos Gomez is a great guy to target. Jose Bautista is 5th. He's a guy that I covered on the first base side of the podcast, but to reiterate, this is a guy that hit 35 home runs, stole 6 bases. I expect the batting average to drop a little bit, probably talking about a 260, 265 hitter as opposed to a guy that hit over 280 last year, but you're paying for the power. I'd say early second round pick is probably fair on Bautista, early, maybe middle of the second round. Jacoby Ellsbury is your next ranked outfielder. Good debut with the New York Yankees. His 16 home runs in his homer-friendly ballpark, stole 39 bases with a 271 average. I'm looking for similar output this year. Power definitely got a boost by changing ballparks. I do think he gets into the teens again, maybe 13, 14 home runs if he loses a couple. If he puts a charge into a few more, maybe he gets to 18, 19. I think he probably falls a little bit short of 20, but you know what? Upper teens home runs, over 30 stolen bases. I say probably 35 to 40 this year. We are talking about an aging outfielder, so his best years of 50-plus stolen bases are probably a thing of the past, but 35 to 40 looks pretty good. Good counting stats. I'm an Ellsbury fan. The only thing you really have to worry about with him is health. He does get nicked up on occasion. Worry about those legs. Slight hamstring twinge might not keep him out of a game, but it could keep him from running. But he does enough across the board that even if he has to put the red light on for a brief period this season because he's dealing with minor leg ailments, he's still going to get you your stolen bases eventually, and he's going to help out elsewhere in the meantime. Seventh is Yasiel Puig. 16 home runs, 11 stolen bases last year, 296 average, walk rate up, K rate down, just what you want to see from a young player. Getting better at commanding the strike zone, getting better at making contact. Next order of business for Yasiel Puig, and I think this, and my ranking reflects that I do think he's going to make this step, is cutting back on his ground ball rates, pounds the ball into the ground a lot. He lifts the ball a little bit more. You're looking at a 20-plus home run hitter. The raw power's there. Speedy enough to steal double digits in bases again. Not the most efficient base stealer. So I'd say probably 10 to 15 stolen bases again, but I think he blasts more than 20 home runs this year. And continued growth and walk and K rate could push his average north of 300 as well. But we'll see. If he does hit the ball in the air more, the batting average on balls in play on fly balls is lower than ground balls and line drives. So it's possible that he could sacrifice a little bit of average for power, but if he cuts back on the strikeout rate, that might get offset anyway. So I'm a big Yasiel Puig fan this year. He's a guy that, you know what, if people are going to fall into this media trap of people piling on Puig for doing the wrong thing, let them. Don't be that foolish. He's a fantastic fantasy player, and I'm a big Yasiel Puig fan. Number 8 is Michael Brantley. He had a near MVP campaign. I mean, it was Mike Trout's award, there was no doubt, but when you're on the ballot and you're in the top 5, you had yourself a hell of a season, and Brantley had just that. 20 homers, 23 stolen bases, 327 batting average. Batting average can be uptick can be credited in large part to gains against left-handed pitchers. As a left-handed batter, was never really a very good hitter against left-handed pitching, but he made some strides last year. It looks legit to me, might give a few homers back. His home run per fly ball rate really did soar, but he's at the right age where he could be maturing into some power. Stolen base rate, he's been an efficient base stealer for years. Over 20 stolen bases again this year should be a lock. Approaching 20 home runs looks good. Maybe more like 17, 18 this year instead of 20 again. High average because he makes a ton of contact. Guy that walks as well. So if you're in an OBP league, he gets some bonus points there. And a guy that's going to hit third for the Indians in a good Indians lineup. So expect a bunch of runs scored and expect a bunch of RBI. Adam Jones checks in 9. He's a guy that I'm unlikely to own pretty much ever in fantasy. And that's not a knock against Jones. I respect that he's a fantastic player. 29 home runs, 7 stolen bases, 281 batting average. I mean, those are great numbers, but I'm always going to be worried about that poor season that's going to come as a result of his really terrible plate discipline. And he hasn't really had it yet. And maybe he can continue to beat his poor plate discipline year after year, but I'm not the type to take that kind of gamble. 2.8% walk rate last year. That's dreadful. 19.5% K rate is fine. It's under 20%, which is good for a power hitter, but he's swinging at seemingly everything. And at some point, I do think that catches up to him. Is it this year? Maybe, maybe not. But I'm not the type that's going to invest in Jones. I think you're going to see a prolonged slump at some point one of these years. Maybe a 270 average instead of 280. Maybe 25 home runs instead of approaching 30. And that all adds up to being just inside the top 10 instead of being a top 5 outfielder like some people have him pegged. Number 10 is Justin Upton. He moves from Atlanta to San Diego through an offseason deal this year. 29 home runs, 8 stolen bases, 270 average last year. Strikeout rate was really high at 26.7%. You'd like to see him cut that down a little bit, maybe get a little bit of average gains. Has the type of raw power to make the transition to Petco work, but he is going to be dinged in the park factor. Right-handed batters do not have the amplified home run rate like they do at Turner Field at Petco. So it's possible that he gets a few home runs taken off. But this guy has big raw power, and you know what? He's the opposite of Adam Jones to me in that I still don't think that we've seen Justin Upton's best season yet. The tools are there, play discipline's there. The strikeout rate's high, but at least he's working counts. One of these years, it's really going to go on for Upton, and I like him as a top 10 outfielder. I really think that the influx of talent in San Diego is going to generate some offense. I think you're going to see good run production totals from Upton, so I'm comfortable drafting him as a top 10 outfielder. Matt Kemp checks in 11th, new teammate Matt Kemp, I should say. He'll be flanking one of the corner outfield positions with Upton playing the other. Big additions to that Padres lineup. He too should benefit from those gains. I think that you're going to see hearty run production numbers from Kemp. 25 home runs, 8 stolen bases last year, 287 batting average. He is an annual line drive hitting machine, so expect another average north of 285. Power should translate fairly well. He does have big raw power as well. So I'd expect over 20 home runs again. And if by chance the home runs do go down a bit and he's looking at 20 instead of 25, that could be an opportunity for him to steal a few more bases. So I do think a double-double is in order. 20 to 25 home runs, probably 10 to 15 stolen bases as long as the hip holds up well, and an average north of 285. And that's a pretty darn good package when you're going to get runs and RBI with it as well. 12th is Carlos Gonzalez. In 281 plate appearances last year, he had 11 home runs, stole 3 bases with a 238 average. He's been under 600 plate appearances since 2011. He does have 2020 potential. He plays at Coors Field. Gotta love the run production upside. Problem is the guy can't stay healthy. It's tough to rank him any higher than this. He's a guy that if he does stay healthy, has top 5 outfielder potential. So at some point, it's worth popping him. I think at pick 12, after the safer 11 options in front of him go off the board, that's about when I start to look at Carlos Gonzalez. But he is a guy that is risky. Maybe you grab a guy like Drew Stubbs later in the draft if you are going to grab Gonzalez as some insurance for when he does go on the disabled list. But Carlos Gonzalez, high upside, high risk, high reward. And he's really the first of those high risk, high reward options on this list. So Carlos Gonzalez checks in 12th. 13th is Nelson Cruz. He had 40 home runs last year, 271 batting average, 4 stolen bases, and flying under the radar is his strikeout rate was just 20.6%. That's good. He's making more contact. More contact's going to help him keep that average north of 270. I don't expect him to hit 40 home runs again moving from Oriole Park at Camden Yards to Safeco, but people, I believe, are overblowing the park factor change. His home run park factor change as a right-handed batter is actually less than the change that Justin Upton's going to go through moving from Turner Field to Petco Park, at least according to the numbers of Stat Corner. And they use a rolling 3-year average, so I'm going to buy what they're selling. And I'm not down on Nelson Cruz. I think you're seeing almost a market overreaction to his big season. It's like, oh, I can't be the sucker that buys his career year. I'm going to let somebody else buy him. Well, I'll happily buy him as the 13th outfielder. He's going to be hitting in a very good Seattle Mariners lineup, and I like his run production upside a great deal. I think you could be talking about 85-plus runs, pushing 100 ribbies again, and again, another 30 home run season wouldn't be shocking for me. With an average north of 270, there certainly is some risk. He has missed time due to injury in recent years. Last year he was healthy. He is in a favorable situation where he'll get to DH in Seattle, so you'd hope that would keep him healthy. But I'm buying Nelson Cruz while others are looking to avoid that sucker label for buying into a career year. 14th is Bryce Harper, and the first thing I'm going to say about him is he's 22 years old. He has 55 home runs in his career by the age of 22. So for all those complaining about how he didn't live up to the hype, you're crazy. I mean, he just came into the league at a bad time. You don't have a Mike Trout come along every every year, every decade, every 2 decades. Mike Trout is a once-in-a-lifetime type of talent. The fact that Harper came along at the same time really seems to undermine how great Harper has been in his career. In 395 plate appearances last year, he had 13 home runs with a 273 average. He played last year nicked up, had a thumb injury. He says he's fully healthy now. He has huge raw power, and I'm the type to gamble on that type of player. Makes contact at a reasonable rate for a power hitter. The light's going to go on at some point, and I mean, he's already a bright option with a fairly high floor at this point, but the ceiling is through the roof. The ceiling is first-round talent, and I like getting first-round talent at this point in drafts. Hammers right-handed pitching already. If he makes any gains against left-handed pitching, Bryce Harper is going to be a monster. 15 is Corey Dickerson. Corey Dickerson was a breakout star for 2014, and those who drafted him were few and far between. It was more like those who scooped him off the waiver wire were the ones that really benefited. 478 plate appearances, 24 home runs, 8 stolen bases, 312 batting average. High BABIP is supported in large part by Coors Field and a high line drive rate. So those that are screaming BABIP regression, don't expect it to be as great as some might exaggerate it to be. He's a guy that should hit for average still. I like the power. I could see him approaching 25 to 30 home runs again this year. And the beauty with Dickerson is you might get more playing time this year. He was respectable against left-handed pitching. He hit them well enough in the minors that he really shouldn't be platooned. One of his outfield mates, who we'll talk about later, in just a couple picks here actually, is a guy who probably should find himself platooned a little bit more often. So Dickerson, maybe you see 600 plate appearances from him this year. So some of those possible regression areas, possibly home run rate, possibly batting average on balls in play, are going to be offset by the added plate appearances, and that's good news for Corey Dickerson owners and prospective drafters. Matt Holliday checks in 16th. Holliday is Mr. Old Reliable. Line drive rate was down last year, but he still hit 272 with a glowing 15.0% K rate. I mean, if you're making contact that often, you're going to hit for a decent average. Your average floor is going to be something like he hit last year, 272. If he hits a few more line drives, I could see him back up around the 290 area. 20 home runs and 4 stolen bases last year. Similar production in those categories this year. He's going to be hitting third. Good lineup with the Cardinals. They added Jason Hayward, who should hit second in front of him. And they already have on-base extraordinaire Matt Carpenter at the top. So plenty of ducks on the pond for Holliday. A couple decent hitters behind him to drive him in. So Holliday is a very reliable, not the sexiest pick at this point because he's an older outfielder, but he's a solid one, and you could do a lot worse than drafting Matt Holliday. Ryan Braun is kind of the opposite. If you're drafting Braun, you're hoping for that huge season of yesteryear. 19 home runs, 11 stolen bases, 266 average in 580 plate appearances last year. Was nicked up. I'm not going to speculate on how his performance has suffered as a result of PEDs because I don't know. And anybody that tells you that they know exactly how much his performance has suffered is full of it. So we do know that he's been nicked up. He's dealt with thumb issues. He says that his thumb is feeling the best that it's felt in a couple of years, I believe was a quote from him recently. So you might see some power improvement. I would expect him to hit over 20 home runs. Batting average should get back up over 270, 280. Could approach 290, 300 again, I mean, like he did in his peak years, but I don't necessarily think the stolen bases are going to go up a great deal. If he does get on base more, which I do expect him to, you could probably see a few more chances, so maybe 15 stolen bases. I don't necessarily think he hits 20 again. And at this point, though, we are talking about a guy who's dealt with a thumb injury, and he's dealt with some injuries lately. I do think you have to take that into account when you're preparing to draft Braun. So I have him ranked 17th. I think that factors in fairly his upside, but as well factors in the downside. Charlie Blackmon ranks 18th, and he's the outfielder that I was alluding to, maybe seeing a little less playing time against left-handed pitching. For the most part, I think he'll play on a fairly everyday basis. Last year, he had 19 home runs, 20 stolen bases, and a 288 batting average, but he really wasn't very good against left-handed pitching. I think he'll see some lefties, but I think that it would behoove the Rockies and Walt Weiss to get Drew Stubbs some plate appearances in place of Charlie Blackmon against left-handed pitching. So there is some downside with taking Blackmon at 18, but anytime you can get a part of the Rockies, hitters that hit at Coors Field, hitters who hit in that lineup, like you want to do it. Charlie Blackmon has a nice combination of power and speed. Hit for a good average. He's going to get that BABIP fueled, that higher BABIP that's fueled by Coors Field's thin air. And I like Charlie Blackmon. And the other thing you have to factor in with Charlie Blackmon is even if he's ceding some early plate appearances to Drew Stubbs, do you really trust Carlos Gonzalez to stay healthy for the full year? I don't. I think you're going to see all four of the Rockies outfielders have value at some point this year. So Charlie Blackmon checks in the top 20 for me. 19th is Christian Yelich. He's a very good hitter. 9 home runs, 21 stolen bases, 284 batting average. If he wants to tap into his power a little bit more, he's going to have to hit more balls in the air. Problem with hitting more balls in the air is that you're probably going to see a slight downturn in batting average. But I think most people would sacrifice 5 to 10 points of batting average if it added on, half dozen or more home runs. And Christian Yelich, really good base runner, really efficient base stealer. So I like Christian Yelich. There is some upside here, but I think that at 19, you're leaving yourself just a little bit of wiggle room if he does hit, and a little bit of wiggle room if he continues to just go about his business as he is. I think I don't think that you'll be totally kicking yourself for making him the 19th outfielder off the board if he just goes about business as he has to this point. Mookie Betts, 20th. Already discussed him in depth with the second baseman. In short, I love Mookie Betts. I'm driving that bandwagon, and it is filling up fast. I expect him to hit around a dozen home runs this year, steal 25 to 30 bases, score over 100 runs hitting atop the Red Sox order, and hit somewhere around 300. So if those numbers sound appealing to you, Mookie Betts might just be your outfielder or second baseman. 21st is George Springer. Springer has big power, hit 20 home runs, stole 5 bases last year, 231 batting average, which is to be expected from a guy who struck out in 33% of his plate appearances. What's easy to overlook is that those 5 stolen bases last year mark probably by far the floor for Springer. He stole 45 bases in the minors across AA and AAA in 2013. So there is a lot of stolen base upside with Springer. He is a 30-20 candidate, a 40-20 candidate. He's a guy that could catapult into first-round territory next year. But with that high of a strikeout rate, there is some risk. I can't fault somebody for wanting to take that risk and vaulting him inside the top 20 at the position, but 21st is where I'm willing to pull the trigger. 22nd is Yoenis Cespedes. 22 home runs, 7 stolen bases last year, 260 average. There's a little bit of batting average upside. Power and speed numbers look about right. Maybe he gets double digits in stolen bases. Should hit over 20 home runs again. I'd expect him to hit 5th or 6th for the Tigers, which is a fantastic spot for having ducks on the pond when you got your 3 and 4 hitters are Miguel Cabrera and Victor Martinez, and either he's hitting behind J.D. Martinez or hitting directly behind those two. You're going to have some guys on base for you. So I like Yoenis Cespedes. And at 22, that's a pretty good bargain outfielder as your number 2 outfielder. Bailey Hamilton, we know what he does. He steals bases, 56 stolen bases last year, and that's despite having just a 292 OBP and a 250 batting average. Any gains in on-base percentage this year, whether it be through walking or a slight uptick in batting average, maybe a little bit of BABIP luck, you're talking about a guy that could steal upwards of 70 bases. So this is a guy that I usually have a bit of a bias for speed-only guys for that fear that, a nagging toe injury, a nagging hamstring injury keeps them from stealing bases. But Hamilton is in elite territory in terms of stolen bases. And you know what? Unlike a guy like Ben Revere, he does have a little bit of power. He hit 6 home runs last year. Whatever he does have for power is going to be maxed out with his ballpark at Great American Ballpark. Maybe a few of these fly balls that he hits end up finding the seats that would be cans of corn in other ballparks. So, I wouldn't bank on a repeat of the 6 home runs, but he's going to give you a few. He's not Juan Pierre. He's not Ben Revere. There is a little bit of popping a stick when he gets into one. Plus, that ball rattles around in the outfield, and Billy Hamilton might take business into his own hands and pull off an inside the park home run. So I like Billy Hamilton. He's a top 25 outfielder for me. 24th is Starling Marte. He's more from that well-rounded outfielder statistical contribution category than Hamilton, but he's also a big base stealer. 30 last year, also hit 13 home runs, 291 batting average. This all in just 545 plate appearances. Get him up north of 600. You'd be talking about a 15 to 18 home run, 40 stolen base guy with 291 with a nice average again as well. I'm a big Starling Marte fan, and you should be too. 25th is Jason Worth. 16 home runs, 9 stolen bases. Might be feeling like they're a little bit lackluster if you're looking for an outfielder in the top 25. I do think he can approach 20 home runs again. Probably not much more in the stolen base tank. Maybe he gets to 10, but that's about the high water mark for projections. 292 average looks fairly legitimate. Really great plate discipline, too. If you're in an OBP league, move Jason Worth up. He walks a ton. What you should really like about Jason Worth is the run production upside. And while it's tough and runs and RBI are volatile because they're so lineup dependent, the Nationals lineup is really good. Worth is going to hit third in it. He's a very good hitter. He's a guy that could approach 90 plus runs, 90 plus RBI. That matters. That plays. That pairs very nicely with his solid power and at least modest contributions in stolen bases. So the total package is very good with Jason Worth. Jason Hayward, another Jason, checks in 26th in the outfield, just 25 years old, so there's still some untapped upside there. And last year, still managed to contribute 11 home runs, 20 stolen bases, 271 average. Good numbers. For a guy that has more raw power, that has as much raw power as Hayward does, the 11 home runs is a little bit disappointing. Could see him making a run at 20 if he can really just turn it around. I mean, the power's there. It's been on display at times. 2020 season is not out of the question. Good on base skills. Going to hit second in the Cardinals order, so you'd expect him to score a bunch of runs. Going to have a high on base hitter in front of him in Matt Carpenter, so he should get a decent number of RBI, even though he's hitting behind the leadoff spot and basically the pitcher or whoever pinch hits for the pitcher from the 9-hole. But I like Jason Hayward this year. I think there's some upside to outperform this draft rank. 27th is Cole Calhoun. 17 home runs, 5 stolen bases, 272 average, and 537 plate appearances. Another guy that if he gets over if he's healthy enough to get over 600 plate appearances this year, could be talking about 20 home runs and maybe a half dozen to 8 to 10 stolen bases, as opposed to just the 5. I don't see him getting more than 10. I think 10 is the absolute maximum ceiling for Calhoun, but not bad. I mean, and he's going to be hitting leadoff for a loaded Angels team. Should score a bunch of runs from the top of the order. Probably not going to have big RBI contributions because he's a leadoff hitter. He's going to be hitting behind the 8 and 9 hitter when the lineup turns over. So, not your average 8 and 9 hitters necessarily in the Angels lineup. Second base is dreadful there, but a guy like Chris Iannetta can get on base, so maybe he gets a few more RBI than your typical leadoff hitter. But I'm a Calhoun fan. For his across the board production. Alex Gordon's 28th, 19 home runs, 12 stolen bases, 266 average last year. Could eclipse 20 home runs this year. Good lineup spot. Should hit second. So you're going to get some runs, going to get some RBI. 29 is Jay Bruce, 18 home runs, 12 stolen bases, 217 average last year. 27.3% K rate really is the biggest problem here. But this is a guy that had over 30 home runs, 30 or more home runs in the few seasons before that. So I believe 3 in a row before that. I see him getting back to 30 home runs. Batting average is going to be tied almost entirely to whether he can cut that strikeout rate down just a little bit again. 250 average and 30 home runs I think is possible. Of course, there's downside for more for a worse average and for less home runs if he's going to continue to strike out. So you have to factor that in. 30th is Brandon Moss. Great ballpark change as I touched on in the first base rankings, and he's healthy. I like Brandon Moss this year. I think he hits over 30 home runs. Shin-Soo Choo is 31st. 13 home runs, 3 stolen bases, 242 batting average in 2014. But the year before, 21 home runs, 20 stolen bases, and 13. That's kind of upside from Choo. If you're looking for a bounce-back candidate, Choo's a good guy to target. I like him. I think that the Rangers are going to be an improved offense this year with the addition of Choo bouncing back and Prince Fielder returning healthy. I like Shin-Soo Choo this year. Ryan Zimmerman checks in at 32. He's a guy that we discussed in depth on the third base podcast. So let's move on to Chris Carter. Chris Carter hit 37 home runs, 227 batting average, 31.8% K rate. Basically speaks to why there's that Big power, low batting average. That's what you're going to get with Chris Carter. You need power. Carter's a good option. There is some batting average risk. And anytime there's batting average risk, you run the risk of losing some home runs, maybe losing some playing time. But Carter should be locked into PT with Houston. And while he might have some cold streaks that frustrate head-to-head owners, he's a good roto target because you know what you're going to get from him at season's end. You'll have to grab some batting average hitters to offset that low mark that he's going to post, but at least you can pencil in that big power. Melky Cabrera is 34th, 16 home runs, 6 stolen bases, 301 batting average. Similar-ish production this year, seems fair. Going to hit second probably for the Chicago White Sox. Really good lineup, so he should score some runs, should drive some in. 35th is Jorge Soler, another Chicago outfielder. This one from the Cubs. He only had 97 plate appearances in the majors last year after spending almost the entire year in the minors. Made the most of them by hitting 5 home runs, posting a 292 average. And for his power, a 24.7% K rate is not bad. If he can maintain that, I don't expect the average to stick around 292, but he's not going to be an average drag. With under 100 plate appearances in the big leagues, not a ton of upper minors experience. There is some risk here, but it's a risk worth taking at this point. JD Martinez enjoyed a monster season last year with the Tigers, 23 home runs, 6 stolen bases, and 480 plate appearances with a 315 average. Now that batting average is bound to come down. Batting average on balls in play really helped that a lot. He should post a above average BABIP because he does hit the ball very hard, but we're talking about a guy that's probably more of a 280 hitter than a 300 plus hitter again. Power looks real. I'm buying JD Martinez again. Really good lineup, as I've touched on. Whether he hits 5th or 6th, depending on how Brad Ausmus decides to arrange his outfielders, Cespedes and Martinez in that outfield, it doesn't matter. I mean, he's going to get run production one way or the other. Carlos Beltran checks in 37th. He played hurt last year and is shown in the numbers. 15 home runs, 3 stolen bases, 233 batting average. 2013, he popped 24 home runs with 2 stolen bases and a 296 average. I'm not ready to write off Beltran yet. The switch hitter is in his elder years at this point in baseball terms anyways. But I do see the average approaching maybe the 270s again. I think he hits over 20 home runs at Yankee Stadium. The ballpark definitely could support that. I think just a handful of stolen bases is what you're going to get at this point in his career. Beltran's not the elite base stealer that he once was, but you know what? 4 to 6 stolen bases, not going to really move the needle a lot, but it's something. It's better than eating a goose egg there. And with 20 homers and maybe an average north of 280, you're looking at a guy that's going to get a boost too from hitting in a favorable spot in the Yankees lineup. So I do like Carlos Beltran for a bounce back this year. 38th is Marcell Ozuna, young player with some upside. He had 23 home runs with 3 stolen bases and a 269 batting average last year, but beware of the 26.8% strikeout rate. The one thing I will say going for Ozuna is he made the leap from AA to the majors in 2013. So that was a sizable leap. Didn't have a lot of playing time at that level. So this is a guy that's really had to figure it out at the big league level. So maybe he turns the corner and takes things a step further this year. But there is some reason for caution, and that's namely a strikeout rate. After Marcell Ozuna, we've got 39th is Gregory Polanco. 7 home runs, 14 stolen bases, 235 batting average, and 312 plate appearances last year. Not exactly numbers that set the world on fire. This is a guy that forced his way onto the major league squad and 305 plate appearances at the AAA level by hitting 7 homers, 16 stolen bases, and a 328 average. Very toolsy outfielder, very high ceiling. Might not all come together this year, but worth taking a chance at a certain point. I'm going to say 39th is at a certain point. I like Gregory Polanco this year. Coco Crisp is already dealing with a nagging injury. This is pretty much the story of Coco Crisp's career. He's going to miss time when he's on the field. Really good source of stolen bases. Decent source of power because he is already dealing with an injury. He's a guy that's probably going to move down my rankings the next time I update them, but still talking about a guy that can really help in stolen bases. And if you're in a league that counts OBP, good walk rate, so he gets a boost there. Hunter Pence, also injured. He was injured at the time of the rankings, so 41st is about where he's going to be. He may move up to Coco Crisp 40th position, but should be back around May. Had 20 home runs, 13 stolen bases, 277 average. Prorate that, factoring in his missed April, and that seems about right. Danny Santana's a guy that ranks 42nd. We discussed him on the shortstops. To reiterate what I said there, good source of stolen bases, should steal over 30, should hit atop the Twins order, giving him some runs scored upside. Batting average is going to come down, but as long as he continues to hit line drives at a high rate, which, as we know, it takes quite a while for line drive rate to stabilize. So there is some danger in buying into that. But the high BAPIP is supported by the fact that he had a high line drive rate. Don't expect him to post one north of 400 again, but I don't see him being a 300 hitter, but I don't see him all of a sudden turning into a 250 hitter either. This is a guy that could hit like 275, 280, I think. And you sign up for that with 30 stolen bases, I'd say. 43 is Brett Gardner. Brett Gardner had surprising power last year, hit 17 home runs. I'd expect that to trend downward a little bit, but he is at a fine age for tapping into more power. So another dozen, maybe 14, 15 home runs, something like that feels about right. 21 stolen bases, very fast. I'd expect him to steal over 20 again this year. 256 batting average, about par the course for his career. So look for a few less homers, maybe a few more stolen bases, but very good source of well-rounded contributions. Not a big run RBI guy, but otherwise you're looking at a pretty solid contributor across the board. AJ Pollock checks in 44th. Actually has a bit more upside than some of the guys in front of him. We just haven't seen a ton of him at the big league level. Missed some time last year, but in 287 plate appearances, 7 home runs, 14 stolen bases, 302 average. I'm a Pollock fan. I buy into the speed more than the power, but there is some pop there. Probably should reach double digits in homers this year. Could steal upwards of 30 bases. Average maybe isn't a true 300 hitter, but 285, 290, nothing wrong with that. The problem is he has missed time, and because he hasn't played a ton at the big league level, there is some question about the sustainability of his stats. So understand that when you draft him, but this is a good place to get him and factor that in. 45th is Steven Souza. 26 in late April, so he's a late bloomer. But any guy that hits 350, 432, 590 with 18 homers and 26 stolen bases at the AAA level that isn't 34-year-old journeyman is going to get my attention. And Steven Souza is a guy worth taking a gamble on. He's going to have a chance to hit in a very RBI-friendly spot in that Rays lineup. I would expect him to hit 5th to start the season, but could hit as high as cleanup. And this is a guy that I'm rolling the dice on. He's one of my favorite outfielder 3 targets, outfielder 4 targets that has upside of more. So Steven Souza is a guy that you want to file the name away of for drafts. Leonis Martin checks in 46, 7 homers, 31 stolen bases, 274 batting average. It's going to be hitting leadoff for the Rangers at least to start the year. Could see Shin-Soo Choo retake that position, but stolen bases, very efficient stolen base artist. I buy into that. Power, that's about what you can expect from him. 8 home runs. Not a big power threat, but he can put a charge into the ball on occasion. But you're paying for the speed here. You can pay for the runs now as well if he's going to continue to hit leadoff. Batting average 274, give or take 5-10 points, but that's about right for Martin. He does hit some infield fly balls, so he's not going to be a great BAPIP guy, but does have the speed to maybe help offset that by some of his other balls in play. 47th is Mark Trumbo. He's a guy that I discussed on the First Base podcast, so I'll quickly sum that up. Doesn't hit right-handed pitching very well. Going to get lifted late in games for a defensive replacement because he's really a first baseman out there. So he's a guy that I like a lot less than my peers. 48 is Yasmani Tomas. He's a guy that's going to drop in my upcoming rankings, as I discussed in depth on the Third Base podcast. Will Myers checks in 49th. He only hit 6 home runs with 6 stolen bases and 361 plate appearances last year and had an awful 222 average. He was a minor league player of the year in 2012. Really bright prospect. Hit 293 with 13 homers and 5 stolen bases and 373 plate appearances in his rookie season with the Rays. Really needs to bounce back, and he's in the right situation to do that. Maybe not the best ballpark for that in Petco, but he joins a revamped Padres offense that should feed off of one another. Myers is a decent rebound candidate and has some upside, but be careful going overboard on it. Power's his best tool, and he's now in a ballpark that suppresses that. Not that Tampa was great for home run hitting, but he's still not in maybe the best environment for really tapping into what should make him a well above average fantasy outfielder. So it might be a little bit before we really see Myers turn it on. Michael Kadire, discussed him in depth on the First Base podcast. He rounds out the top 50. So let's go into the speed round for the last 50 players. Lorenzo Cain ranks 51st. He's a guy that hit 5 home runs with 28 stolen bases and a 301 average last year. Expect the average to go down. He's not going to maintain a 380 BAPIP. Should hit third for the Royals, so you're going to get some runs and RBI. Stolen bases look legit. He is a very, very fast player. Maybe not going to steal 28 again, but he should steal around 25, maybe 25 to 30 again. Power could turn that into 10 home runs, but not a great fly ball hitter, not a great source of power, but he does have some in his stick. So there is some upside here at 51. 52, we've got Ben Revere, stolen base threat. That's what you're paying for with him. Alex Rios, hoping for a rebound if you're drafting him. He's 53rd. Has some had power issues last year, but has hit for power before. Should get the green light to run for Ned Yost. Ned Yost likes to run his Royals. Steve Pearce checks in 54th. He was a late bloomer last year. Age 31 breakout, 21 home runs and 383 plate appearances, 293 batting average. I'd expect that batting average to go down because he's probably going to see more at-bats against right-handed pitching this year. Extra at-bats should be good for the home run total, though. Should hit over 20 home runs again this year. I don't think the breakout is totally legit, but it's not a fluke either. So there's some realness to it. The power is real. Batting average isn't going to be maintained. Ben Zobrist, best utilized as shortstop or second base. He ranks at 55th. 56 is Marlon Byrd. You're paying for some power if you're getting him. He's playing in Cincinnati this year. Good ballpark for that. Adam Eaton's 57. You're looking for runs and stolen bases from him, hitting atop the Chicago White Sox order. Austin Jackson is 58th in Seattle, coming off a down year, but a bounce-back candidate. Should hit leadoff for the most part. There is some talk that Ricky Weeks could hit leadoff against left-handed pitching on occasion, as Weeks platooning in left field with Dustin Ackley. 59th is Curtis Granderson, and he's a guy that I want to talk about a little bit. He hit 40-plus home runs in 2011 and 2012. Just 20 home runs with 8 stolen bases last year. They did change the dimensions of Citi Field, moved the fences in center field and right center. That's going to benefit Curtis Granderson. I like Curtis Granderson this year. I think there's very real power upside, and I might take him in front of a few of the players ranked ahead of him. This feels like a fair hedge, though, for the concerns about what he doesn't do well, the strikeouts, potential batting average drag. 60th is Carl Crawford. Depending on how the outfield shakes out in LA, he should be starting. Jock Peterson will be out there, and Yasiel Puig will be in the outfield. But Andre Ethier could cut into some playing time at some point. Crawford's the better outfielder, though. I'd expect Ethier to get shipped out at some point, but then again, I expected that last year. Crawford, you're paying for speed, basically. Gonna get a few home runs. Decent contributor, and maybe not his Rays peak days, but still a decent option. Torrey Hunter moves from Detroit to Minnesota. Not very good for run production potential, but the Twins were an above-average offense last year, and he should hit cleanup. So by hitting cleanup, maybe he offsets some of that move from Tigers offense to Minnesota. Older player, but you know what you're going to get. Rusney Castillo, by getting injured, he really paved the way for Mookie Betts to go nuts in the spring and cement that his status as the starting center fielder. Castillo could end up starting the year in the minors if the Red Sox don't want him to sit on the bench at the big league level. In fact, I would expect that you'd expect a young hitter like Castillo to continue to get playing time, continue his development in the minors if he's not going to be a regular outfielder, and he's not at this point. Just wait for Shane Victorino to get nicked up, and then it's the Rusney Castillo show. Josh Harrison checks in at 63rd. Not a big fan, as I said on some of the other podcasts. He's a guy that contributed across the board last year, and I'm expecting across the board regression. Bad news for a player like that. Desmond Jennings is 64th. Might not necessarily hit leadoff this year. The talk is that John Jaso could hit leadoff for the Rays. Jennings would move down into a more friendly RBI spot. Didn't steal as many bases as you'd like from the speedster last year, but the speed's there. He's got the upside, has a little bit of power. 65th is Travis Snider, and this is the guy that I love. Big power potential. Last year ranked in the top 10 in average fly ball and home run batted ball distance per baseball heat maps. I think he's got 30 home run upside now that he's in Baltimore, which if he has 30 home run upside, he's a steal at pick 65. He's a guy that's going to be on probably most of my rosters this year. Big second half last year for Pittsburgh where he improved his strikeout rate, improved his strikeout rate on the whole last year, but really kicked it up to another level in the second half. I like what Travis Snider is doing. He looks like an everyday outfielder for the Orioles. Good ballpark change. I'm a big fan. Dexter Fowler is 66th. Should hit leadoff for the Cubs. Good on base percentage is going to allow him to score runs. He has the raw tools to maybe hit for more power than he has at this point. Fast, but not an efficient base stealer. More of a tease than a great baseball player, but still a very good one and in a favorable situation to score runs. 67th is Oswaldo Arcia. Good power upside, 20 home runs and 410 plate appearances last year. 31.0% K rate. That's really the fly in the ointment with him. He was a very good hitter in the upper minors. I mean, cut back on the strikeout rate. Could be a slightly better source of batting average than he is right now. As it stands, at worst, you're paying for a decent source of power with a low batting average. There's upside for more, though. Obviously, Avisail Garcia is 68th. He's got some upside. Strapping outfielder that has been called Baby Miggy in reference to Miguel Cabrera and their similar physical appearances, but don't be fooled. Garcia isn't Miguel Cabrera. There is some upside. There's some power there. Good raw power that hasn't really translated completely in games yet. Not sure if that's going to happen this year, but there's some talent there. Chris Davis is 69th. You're paying for power. The problem with Chris Davis, and I'm lower on him than most of my expert peers at Fantasy Pros, is I worry about Gerardo Parra in that outfield. Chris Davis is not a fantastic defensive outfielder. Basically, he's in the outfield for his bat. Really hits left-handed pitching hard, but if he struggles at all against right-handed pitching this year, you could see Gerardo Parra steal some starts from him because he is a superior defender, and Parra is capable of hitting right-handed pitching. Nick Markakis checked in 70th, moves from the Orioles lineup to a dreadful Braves one. Probably going to hit leadoff there. On-base skills should allow him to score runs at a decent clip. But outside of Freddie Freeman hitting third, there's not a lot of offensive talent in that Braves lineup. Not a huge Markakis fan this year. Not a big power source. Not a big stolen base source. Can do a bit of both. Should hit for average. Basically, you're paying for average and runs scored. And the fact that the Braves lineup is so dreadful does hurt his stock. Colby Rasmus, 71st. Moves on from one hitter's park to another, going from Toronto and the Rogers Center to Minute Maid Park in Houston. We've seen what he can do at his best. We've seen what he can do at his worst. Basically, he's a low average hitter that can hit for power. If his strikeout rate continues to stay high, then we're talking about a guy that could be in trouble for that batting average. But you're paying for the power if you're drafting Rasmus and hoping for the best. Jack Peterson, bright prospect, struggled in his cup of coffee last year, but the way's been paved for him to get playing time this year with Matt Kemp out the door. Upside, but remember, young players sometimes take a little while to get transitioned to the big leagues. Angel Pagan is 73rd. Pagan's already dealing with some back issues. He's going to move down in the rankings the next time I update them based on the fact that he's nicked up, but he's playing in spring games again. On the bright side of things with Pagan, the hope voiced by manager Bruce Bochy is that Norichika Aoki can handle the leadoff spots that Angel Pagan can hit third. Hitting third would be great for Pagan's value. You'd be hitting right in front of cleanup hitter Buster Posey. He'd have a couple of table setters on in front of him. So monitor that situation. Also monitor the back. Pagan's probably going to miss time. He just can't seem to stay healthy, but when he is on the field, he's decent. He's a good source of stolen bases. Has a little bit of power for a guy who you're really drafting for speed and a decent average. Shane Victorino, 74th. He's going to start the year in a very loaded Red Sox offense. Can hit for a little bit of power, steal some bases. Biggest knock on Victorino is he struggles to stay healthy, and he's got some talent behind him that could press him for playing time. Dominic Brown, disastrous 2014 after a very strong 2013. There's upside here for a post-hype breakout again, but really he's had one big month in the majors. You're gambling on tools and you're gambling on him putting it together. Not sure I'm willing to gamble any higher than the 75th outfield spot on that. Rajai Davis is 76th. He's going to play. He's right now a fourth outfielder. I'd expect him to start against left-handed pitching at the least. If Anthony goes face plants, though, Rajai Davis could be in line for more playing time. You're paying for stolen bases, and that's basically it for Davis. Martin Prado, discussed him on the second baseman and third baseman. So let's move on to Norichika Aoki at 78. As I said, there's talk that he could hit leadoff. And if he hits leadoff, he has voiced a desire to steal more bases again, as he did in Milwaukee. Could be talking about a source of 20 plus stolen bases, and decent runs scored total. Not any power to speak of, but you'll take a decent average, take runs, and take some stolen bases if you're drafting Aoki this late. Arismendi Alcantara, 79, should be better utilized at second base if you're drafting him. So we'll move on to Michael Saunders, who's in Toronto. Ditches Safeco Field for Toronto via a trade with the Blue Jays. Blue Jays acquired him for J.A. Happ, I believe. So Michael Saunders in a more friendly environment. Looks like he may be ready closer to opening day than anticipated. He did have surgery on a torn meniscus in his left knee. Doesn't hit left-handed pitching, so he's better used in daily games or in games that allow, and season-long leagues that allow daily changes, so you can sit him against left-handed pitching. Has some power upside, can steal some bases, not a good source of batting average. Juan Lagares is 81st, might be hitting leadoff for the Mets, which would be good for his run scored total, but not a good on-base guy, doesn't walk much. Batting average is could be decent because he has some speed and he puts the ball in play. Not much in terms of power. Can steal a few bases. Nothing super exciting, but you got to like the lineup spot. John Jay's 82nd. Good source of batting average, and not a heck of a lot else. Basically, he's the type of guy that you want to grab to maybe help offset Chris Carter if you've got a low batting average guy like that. Can steal a few bases, can hit a few home runs. Could be pressed for playing time in center field with the outfield now flanked and right and left by Matt Holliday and Jason Hayward. That leaves Randall Grichuk and Peter Borges looking for some scraps in center field. Maybe Jay sits a little bit against left-handed pitching. Drew Stubbs is 83rd. He's a great late-round target. A good handcuff if you own Charlie Blackmon or Carlos Gonzalez, as you could have a nifty little platoon there, especially if Stubbs is able to get some additional playing time with somebody else getting injured. Good speed, good power, and his batting average shouldn't be dreadful, at least at home. It's going to be helped. Better target for roto leagues than head-to-head possibly, because you're looking at the total season stats. When he's on the road, he's not going to be a terribly useful player. But the fact that Coors Field really wreaks havoc on curveballs and Drew Stubbs struggles so much with curveballs, it plays right into his hand. It forces pitchers to throw him pitches he can better handle. Mike Morris is 84th. Dalton Pompey, 85th. You're talking about speed there with Pompey. Decent upside. Kevin Kiermaier, 86th. 87th is Alejandro De Aza. 88th is Dinar Span, who's going to miss some time early this season. Going to miss April. Probably should return in May. Andre Ethier's 89th. As I said, I do think he's going to get dealt at some point this year, hence the ranking. I may hedge and move him down with my next outfield rankings. At this point, I thought that maybe the Dodgers would have been able to ship him out of town. Haven't really been any injuries around camp that have opened up a need for an outfield position for anyone else where they've another club swooped in and taken Andre Ethier off of the Dodgers' hands. So he may move down a little bit. Seth Smith is 90th. He's not, and actually I'll point out that Matt Joyce is 91st because this applies to both. Neither one hits left-handed pitching. Both hit right-handed pitching well. Both should hit in favorable lineup slots for their clubs. 92nd is Logan Morrison. 93rd is Josh Reddick, who's injured to start the year. If he's going right, you're going to get some power. Anthony Gose is 94th. You're paying for speed here. His defense should keep him in the lineup, even if he struggles a bit with the bat. Going to be a down order hitter. Going to have to swallow a bad batting average, but you're going to get some stolen bases from him. Michael Bourne, 95th. 96th is Dustin Ackley. 97th is Emilio Bonifacio. 98th is Stephen Vogt. 99th is Garrett Jones. And your 100th ranked outfielder is another guy that I expect to be traded, and a guy that's actually supposed to see some playing time at first base potentially this year, Carlos Quentin. If Quentin is dealt, expect an AL team to be kicking the tires on him. He would look great as a designated hitter in the American League. If he is dealt, he zooms up this list. If not, the potential for him siphoning some at-bats at first base from Yonder Alonso is fairly high. Alonso just hasn't done it at first base, so I wouldn't rule out Quentin getting some extra playing time there. He'll play some corner outfield if they need to give Justin Upton or Matt Kemp a day off, but right now he's not in an ideal situation, but I think he could be moved to one. And that's going to do it for the podcast. I've discussed actually the notable higher ranked and lower ranked players from Fantasy Pros. Let me quickly touch on them. Mookie Betts, I'm enamored with. Expert consensus rank is 34th. I have him ranked 20th. You know why I love him. Travis Snyder, I have 65th. Expert consensus rank is 86th. I love the power. I think he has 30-plus home run power potential, and I think I could even see him ranking higher next time I do updates. Mark Trumbo is who I have ranked, is one of the two outfielders I have ranked lower. My rank 47th, expert consensus rank is 33rd. Struggles against righties bother me. The fact that he's going to get lifted late in games for defensive replacements is not ideal. Ben Revere is another spot where I veer from the other experts. I have him ranked 52nd. Expert consensus rank is 37th. Again, it might be my anti-speed bias, but I'm not a fan of guys that are speed only, especially on a team like the Phillies that's really looking to move anything that's not a part of the long-term future. Verveer's moved to a situation where he's not allowed to run as much. Maybe he has a manager that just does not run as often as Ryan Sandberg does in Philadelphia. That would hurt his value. Minor leg injury that could keep him from running, may not keep him out of games again. Doesn't do enough elsewhere. I don't feel comfortable taking him in the top 50. So with that, we've covered the outfield rankings. Until next time, stop by fantasybaseballcafe.com. Check out the forums. Check out the great content up there. You can look over these rankings as well. They are posted there, as well as Dollars rankings. Great content. Get ready for drafts. And if you've already done your drafts, a great tool to utilize to see who might be on the waiver wire that's a little better than maybe some of the guys that you drafted. So until next time, thank you for joining me. Take care.